Sweat clung to Max's skin as he jolted awake. The air felt thick, heavy. He tried to recall a dream, a nightmare, but his mind remained blank. Panic welled up, a familiar feeling he couldn't place. He was in his apartment, but something felt off. The light outside his window was an unnatural green. Max stumbled out of bed, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The apartment seemed to pulse with that same sickly green light. He reached for his phone, needing the comfort of its familiar weight. The screen flickered to life, the green light reflecting in his wide eyes. A message, stark and white, filled the screen. "Welcome to the Gaming Monster Challenge." The words seemed to writhe, mocking his confusion. His first thought was that it was a prank, a cruel joke by one of his gamer buddies. But deep down, a chilling certainty settled in his gut. This was no joke, this was real. The rules of the challenge were simple, brutal, and unforgiving. Every single day, for the next 2 years, Max would be required to create not just simple games, but fully realized gaming experiences. One day, it might be a sprawling role-playing game, the next a fast-paced platformer. The genre didn't matter, only the output, and the sheer volume of what was demanded of him was staggering. 100, that was the magic number. 100 new gaming jobs had to be coded, debugged, and ready to ship every single day. It seemed impossible, the work of an entire development studio, not one lone programmer, but the message on his phone was clear. This wasn't a team effort. This was his burden, and his alone. The first few days were a blur. Fueled by adrenaline and fear, Max threw himself into the challenge. He hadn't felt this alive, this challenged in years. Coffee became his lifeblood, sleep a distant memory. His apartment transformed into a war room, littered with empty energy drink cans and crumpled pages of code. He started with simple games, familiar genres he could churn out quickly. Endless runners, puzzle games, basic shooters. Each one had to be unique, engaging, and most importantly, error-free. He pushed himself to his limits, his fingers flying across the keyboard, his eyes burning from the screen's glare. The message hadn't been explicit about the consequences of failure, but Max wasn't naive. He'd seen enough horror movies, played enough survival horror games to know that happy endings were rare in these scenarios, and the constant gnawing fear in the pit of his stomach told him that failure here wouldn't be a game over screen. There was a countdown timer on his phone, ticking away the seconds until the daily deadline. With every passing hour, the pressure mounted. His code became sloppier, his eyes heavier. He knew that rushing would lead to mistakes, and mistakes, he suspected, would lead to pain. Section 5. Jaws of Defeat. The first bite came on day 5. He'd been up for 48 hours straight, fueled by nothing but caffeine and desperation. His latest creation, a side-scrolling beat-em-up, was riddled with glitches. He'd missed a deadline, his vision blurring, his fingers numb. And then the pain hit. It wasn't a physical pain, not exactly. It was more like his very being was being consumed, his digital essence devoured by something monstrous. He glimpsed it in the flickering light of his monitor, a creature of pure code and malice, its jaws snapping shut around his digital avatar. He screamed, a silent scream lost in the confines of his apartment. Section 6. ChatGPT to the rescue? The bite, though excruciating, didn't kill him. It was a warning, a taste of what awaited him should he fail again. Despair threatened to consume him, but then he remembered. ChatGPT. The AI language model had exploded in popularity, capable of writing everything from poetry to code. Could it be his salvation? He spent precious hours feeding the AI prompts, guiding it to generate code, refine algorithms, and even design levels. It wasn't perfect, but it was a lifeline, a way to buy himself precious time. With ChatGPT as his reluctant partner, he managed to claw his way back from the brink, completing the day's quota just as the timer hit 0. Section 7. 2 years to freedom. The message on his phone had been crystal clear. 2 years of this relentless grind of coding under unimaginable pressure. 2 years of fearing the bite of the gaming monster, of pushing his mind and body to their absolute limits. If he survived, there was a reward. A life-changing sum of money, enough to never work another day in his life. But the money was secondary now. Survival was all that mattered. Each day bled into the next. A relentless cycle of coding, debugging, and praying that ChatGPT wouldn't fail him. He thought about escaping, about running away, but where could he run? The Gaming Monster Challenge wasn't bound by physical constraints. It was in his head, in his very code. Section 8. Pixels of Fear. He learned to hate the color green. It was the color of the monster, the color of the code that held him captive, the color of his nightmares. He saw it everywhere now, in the flickering streetlights, in the leaves of the plants he'd forgotten to water, in the reflection of his own haunted eyes. He'd lost track of how many times he'd been bitten. Each bite chipped away at his resolve, at his sanity. He was existing on a knife's edge, fueled by fear and caffeine. He knew that one wrong line of code, one missed deadline, and the monster would devour him completely, scattering his digital essence into a million pixels of fear. Section 9. A choice to make. 2 years. It felt like a lifetime. The finish line was in sight, but so was the monster, its jaws agape, its code hungry for his failure. He could feel his resolve crumbling, his spirit breaking. Was it worth it? Was any amount of money worth this torment? He had a choice to make. Keep fighting, keep coding, and pray he survived the final push. Or give in, let the monster have him, and hope that oblivion was preferable to this digital hell. The clock was ticking. The monster was watching. The choice was his and his alone.